morning, everyone. On behalf of my co-chair, Heather Leslie, from the Darling Marine Center at the University of Maine, I'd like to thank the entire Coastal Marine Working Group for their contributions. And thanks to the Climate Council and the legislature for convening us and giving us this opportunity to present our recommendations about climate change, in particular in the marine and coastal sector. I think this is the only work group that actually is geographically based. So it shows the outsized importance of concerns about the coastal environment and climate change. My name is Kathleen Leyden, and I direct Maine's coastal program, which is based at the Department of Marine Resources. So we have 6 strategies to present today, and Heather and I are going to be tag teaming as we go along. So our work group, as has been said of the other work groups, we're large, we're diverse, true to our name, hardworking. So here they are. Heather and I really enjoyed working with this group of energetic, committed group of people who put a lot of effort into the work, but we really want to note that we were not representative of all coastal stakeholder groups, nor could we be, with the size and the time that was allotted to us for our tasks. So we're pointing to the need to do additional outreach to not only ground truth our recommendations, we really want to take them on the road and see what others think about them. So our work group process, we had 38 members that were invited to join the work group. We reviewed literature at the beginning. We assessed the strengths of the work group, what we could really talk about from our own knowledge base, and therefore really honed what we could tackle. So some of the things that you're going to see in this presentation, we're not going to talk about setbacks from the ocean or sea level rise rates. We really left that particular piece to the community resiliency group and really focused on the natural environment and working waterfronts. So we started with mutual learning. To get us up to the same speed and level of knowledge through a series of webinars. We then broke into subcommittees. We immediately dispersed this work to our subcommittees, and they did the detailed work. I'm not sure what form of the report that the council is going to see from us, but we have an 8-page summary of the subcommittee's work, and then there are up to 25 pages of detail on some of our strategies. So what we did for outreach, our working group members were active in giving presentations to their constituencies and getting on agendas of groups that were already meeting. We also did a survey to which we received over 400 responses. So this was a popular survey that was circulated far and wide, and we got some really good feedback from that. So coastal towns, they play an outsized role. The coast in general plays an outsized role in our conversations about climate change. Our coastal communities and coastal ecosystems are really foundational to Maine's identity and our economy. And just a few statistics. We know, especially with the talk of the impacts to the tourism industry from COVID-19, coastal tourism is a huge part of our state's economy. Fishing and fish farming, $646 million in landed values in 2019. And the population, 45% of Maine residents live in coastal towns. That's a lot of people. I don't know if any of the work groups have been looking at the possibilities for in-migration, but other people might want to move to Maine and move to the coast when they see their climates changing. So those of us who work on the water or live near the coast, we've all seen these changes. We've seen changes in shoreline erosion. We've seen more flooding at high tide. We've seen compromised infrastructure. Fishermen have seen shifting species. New invasive species have been spotted. And all of this leads to uncertainty, which uncertainty for municipalities in terms of their capital improvements and uncertainties for the business sector, coastal and marine, is not a good thing. But what struck me throughout this process is that the coastal and marine sector has always adapted. We've adapted over time, and there are many opportunities that we're going to lay out in the following slides. So what do we see as some of the opportunities if our recommendations are implemented and, most importantly, properly resourced. A lot of this work involves not only state agencies, but our NGO, university, community, volunteer partnerships, and all will need additional resources. So, first benefit, businesses and towns can understand their vulnerabilities. And if they have data and information and technical assistance, as that's another common theme, they'll be able to make sound decisions. Did they elevate? Did they restore? Did they alter business practices? A second benefit is that if we use nature to help coastal adaptation, we'll create green jobs, we'll protect shorelines and habitats, we'll offer more public access, and hopefully we'll save money over more traditional infrastructure, hard infrastructure. Next benefit, we're seeing shifts in habitats, but we think there'll be new and emerging seafood harvesting opportunities as these shifts occur. And imports. We have tremendous opportunities, ports and working waterfronts, to serve perhaps a new renewable energy sector in Maine and regionally. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my co-chair, Heather Leslie, as I mentioned, the director of the Darling Marine Center in Walpole, as we dive into our strategies.
Thank you, Kathleen. Yes, a quick call out to the staff, Jess Riley-Moman, Jess Waller, and our facilitator, Laura Singer, working with CBI, were an amazing support to this group. We had additional support from staff in DMR and DEP and other agencies and institutions, and you know who you all are. We very much appreciate everyone who leaned in for this work. This is a strategy overview slide, and the remaining slides, Kathleen and I will go through these 6 strategies, but briefly, they are tracking climate impacts to support adaptive decision-making. Number 2, providing technical assistance and outreach through the Coastal and Marine Information Exchange and the Maine Business Council, Seafood Business Council. Number 3, enhancing mitigation by conserving and restoring coastal habitats. 4, with nature-based solutions, promoting climate adaptive ecosystem planning and management. 5, managing for resiliency of Maine's marine fisheries and aquaculture industries. And 6, creating climate-ready working waterfronts. As Kathleen highlighted, all these strategies are draft in terms of the view of the Coastal and Marine Working Group members. They definitely require additional stakeholder discussion and community engagement, and they also require a fuller understanding of the costs and benefits, and specifically who will bear those costs and who will benefit from these strategies, particularly in our state's more remote and rural coastal and island communities. The first strategy, as I said, is focused on tracking climate impacts to support adaptive decision-making. This is essentially monitoring for climate change preparedness. And it involves a series of actions, including establishing a state-level climate collaborative for coastal and marine monitoring. Second, collecting, assessing, and sharing information on how climate change is affecting our coastal and marine areas in order to support that decision-making, both at the local level and at higher levels. And finally, this strategy leverages existing programs that are led by a wide range of state, nonprofit, academic, government, and citizen science partners throughout our state. As an example, if you look to the right here, you see a picture of a fishing vessel where Maine Department of Marine Resource staff through the Maine Coastal Program are leading monitoring of nearshore marine habitats and doing mapping in collaboration with fishermen. You also see in the upper right, work by the Maine Coastal Program scientists tracking salt marsh change. As sea level rises, so do marshes, and it's important for us to keep track of those in terms of coastal community resilience and many of the goals related to the council. Many of the existing monitoring programs we have in this state were not established to track implications of climate change, but they can be adjusted going forward in order to give us the information that we need to do adaptive decision-making at different levels. The second strategy focuses on technical assistance and outreach, just as you heard from the previous group. And in coordination with that monitoring collaborative that I just discussed, we envision 2 pieces of the technical assistance. The first one, the Coastal and Marine Information Exchange, is focused on stakeholders, municipal officials and other residents and individuals working at the local level, and ensuring that they have the information that they need in order to make decisions. The second element of this technical assistance is tailored specifically to Maine's seafood industry and to the harvesters, the shoreside businesses, and the working waterfront entities that need tailored information and decision support so that they can make operational decisions, capital investments, and long-range plans so as to respond to the changing climate and to adapt and mitigate accordingly. This picture on the right is a picture of a commercial clammer who's talking with students as part of the Maine Shellfish Learning Network. This learning network is an example of existing programs that are already doing this type of integrated technical assistance and learning support throughout our state. This network supports more than 20 different coastal community projects from Lubec to Yarmouth, and in each case, community members are helping to protect and improve community-managed shell fisheries. So I just want to highlight that example, one of many, of how there's already traction and investment at the local level with state and federal support to do this type of technical assistance and outreach that's tailored to coastal and marine needs. Kathleen, you're up.
Yes, so this is our blue carbon strategy, and it's a mitigation strategy, how to enhance greenhouse gas emissions by conserving and restoring coastal habitats. This is a very exciting strategy, and I think is getting a lot of traction in the state, regionally, and even nationally. So this strategy harnesses the ability of what we refer to as coastal blue carbon resources that can help meet Maine's greenhouse gas reduction goals. The term coastal blue carbon refers to carbon that's sequestered by coastal ecosystems like salt marshes and seagrass beds. And it turns out that blue carbon ecosystems are an order of magnitude more efficient at burying carbon per unit than forests. When they're degraded, flooded with fresh water, or drained, they become sources of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, including methane. Luckily, the diverse geological features and the vast length of Maine's coastline provide us with abundant natural opportunities to sequester greenhouse gas. The co-benefits from this strategy include flood storage, buffering against damaging storms, improving the health and resilience of coastal ecosystems, protecting biodiversity, and really protecting nursery areas that Maine's coastal fisheries depend on. So how do we do this? What are the essential components? And we've got 3 bullets up on our slide. One is really mapping, modeling, and monitoring. So we're proposing to do a comprehensive inventory of blue carbon resources. What are our baseline estimates of current storage? What are the opportunities for sequestration, and how do we track that over time? The second, and very important, is creating a financing mechanism for carbon credits. So using those resources, those funds, to offer these systems full protection. And we've heard that as a theme. Judy Easterly talked very eloquently about how to establish these types of financing mechanisms. And related is increasing the conservation and restoration of these ecosystems so that we can obtain these climate benefits, mitigation benefits. So some of the things that were mentioned as actions by this subcommittee: can we enhance environmental conditions to promote plant growth? Can we create or restore salt marsh and eelgrass habitat where conditions remain suitable or can be made suitable? And what about seaweed aquaculture? Are there ways that seaweed aquaculture can sequester carbon, and how do we optimize that? So this strategy, number 4, is about nature-based solutions, using nature-based solutions to promote climate adaptation. This is a very simple notion, and many of us who are land use planners, coastal planners, and others in the field may have read Design with Nature, written by Ian McHarg back in the 1970s. It's a favorite book on my bookshelf, and it's really about staying away from natural resources, allowing them to keep their functionality and deliver the benefits that we want. So some of those benefits from marshes: pollution filtration, retaining stormwater, nursery grounds for juvenile fish. We're also talking about protecting and maintaining beaches. In some cases, it may make sense to nourish beaches, which costs money. Managing dunes, protecting salt marshes. They all protect low-lying adjacent development. They also support vulnerable species and offer a lot of benefits for recreation and tourism. So how do we get there? The first bullet is planning, looking at natural systems through a climate lens. How do natural systems support land use development and vice versa? The development community is a partner in this. We need to offer incentives to help them do it. Habitat creation and enhancement. We have an example right now in Casco Bay in the town of Brunswick, partnering with the Nature Conservancy, Maine Coast Heritage Trust, the town of Brunswick. I'm forgetting partners, but many of them, who so far we've installed 2 of 3 living shorelines, which are basically using natural treatments like fallen wood and bagged, aged, clean oyster shell to create habitat and also mitigate shoreline erosion. So there are permitting challenges for those, financing challenges. Let's get more of those case studies on the ground and monitor what they're doing. The next bullet is about restoration. The picture to the slide is a perched culvert over a tidal stream. At 900 locations in Maine, tidal flow is hindered or blocked by culverts, bridges, and dams. This particular culvert is perched way above the marsh creek, and it can't accommodate present and projected tidal flows, as well as pass fish and serve important wildlife. So an example of something that's ongoing right now is an effort to create best management practices through a program called Coastwise. So how can we bring education and training to local officials and restoration practitioners about restoring these tidal culvert sites? It's not the same and requires special expertise and training. And then stormwater management, our last bullet on that slide. We know that it carries pollutants. In many locations, or some locations, there are elevated levels of nitrogen in stormwater, affects the pH and salinity of estuarine waters, and therefore the things that can grow there. So we're having increased stormwater intensities. So we do have laws, rules, and guidance at the federal level, the state level, the municipal level, where we're coming at this from a number of different governance foci. But some of the ways that we can address stormwater, we definitely need to tighten up those regulations. In terms of development, low impact development, green roofs, rain gardens, public processes like watershed planning, reducing nutrient loading where it's needed, and then very importantly, in some parts of the coast, particularly Casco Bay, determine whether or not to set numeric criteria for nitrogen in marine waters.
So strategy 5 is focused on managing for resilience of Maine's fisheries and aquaculture industries. There's 3 big bullets here, and there's multiple actions that the group is proposing under each of these. So at the very highest level, this strategy highlights ways that we can strengthen fisheries management to ensure sustainable fisheries and new opportunities as fisheries adapt to climate change. It also highlights market support and business resilience needs, as well as regulatory and policy objectives that are necessary to enable Maine's fisheries and aquaculture operations to remain reliable economic contributors as they adapt to climate change. So there's a lot of complement with this fishery and aquaculture focused strategy, and the first 2 that I talked about, strategies 1 and 2, focused on monitoring and technical assistance and outreach respectively. As Kathleen mentioned at the beginning, coastal community members, and particularly fishermen, are masters of adaptation and have been responding to change in the environment and in the economy for a long time. So this strategy is about providing more tools and resources for fishermen and fisheries managers to do what they already do very well. And as with earlier strategies, there's some exciting things already underway. On the left here, you can see a plate of green crabs. So this is an example of how we can take an emerging pesky species on the Maine coast and change it into something that people like to eat. And on the right, you can see an image of the Maine Department of Marine Resources scientists. They're preparing an instrument for field deployment. And instruments like these complement the statewide sampling, like the Maine, New Hampshire in-source trawl survey, that are so vital to supporting fisheries management in our state. So there's already a lot of really good groundwork laid. An important caveat here is that this strategy requires a lot more conversation and consideration by members of the industry themselves. We had some great input and public outreach over the last month, but there's a lot more conversation to be had. Back to Kathleen to wrap it up.
Okay, great. Thanks, Heather. In our last strategy, we're turning back to the land and water interface and focusing on working waterfronts. And in this presentation, we're talking about those facilities that are adjacent to, in, out, or over the water, and they truly rely on a waterfront location to conduct operations. They provide a wide range of access and associated facilities for many sectors: fishing, transportation, security, tourism. And our villages and downtowns are organized around waterfronts. They're thriving historical and cultural places that people love to visit. They also operate as a system. When something happens in one part of the supply chain, it affects everything else, as we've seen recently. Working waterfronts are facing critical challenges in a changing climate. I won't repeat the wave action and everything that's coming from the seaside, but warmer seas are changing the composition of fisheries landings. Melting Arctic will change trade routes, and our need for ocean renewables may require additional retooling and expansion of our ports and waterfronts. And finally, the new uses of the ocean and ports and working waterfronts will need to responsibly coexist. There are tremendous opportunities here. Marine infrastructure is designed to be wet. It gets wet, and you can retrofit it, although it is expensive. There may be opportunities when we see who are the winners and losers, who can make the investments that are necessary along the waterfront to be able to remain resilient. There are opportunities for redevelopment that will occur that I think could favor expansion of working waterfronts. And then new technology is another opportunity. Boats and marine engines, new technology, best management practices in the cruise ship industry, and increases in solar energy at these facilities can reduce the carbon footprint. So quickly, 3 strategies: create an infrastructure trust fund, a revolving loan fund. These fixes can be simple to really complicated. Coastal Program recently concluded an analysis in Penn Bay where we looked at 8 working waterfronts facilities, and in addition to the deferred maintenance, the areas were presented with a blueprint for how they could improve their structures and their operations. And it's upwards of $250,000 to do those types of resiliency measures at some of these places. The second bullet is about technical assistance. I won't go into that because it's been covered in great detail. Protect the state's investment in working waterfronts. When we're providing funds for construction of facilities, purchasing land, purchasing covenants on fishing properties, let's look at this through a climate lens. What is that waterfront going to look like given future projections? And then we have a regulatory improvement piece as well. The Coastal Resiliency Group, all the information behind Judy's work is a very careful analysis of state laws that we really think need to be tweaked and tightened up in many cases. So the point we want to make here is, what can we do about the flood insurance burden for these facilities? They're meant to get wet, but they have high cost in terms of flood insurance. And they also have a very complex, they're some of the most highly regulated places. And we need to, when we're rethinking our regulatory and non-regulatory approaches, Don't make it more complicated. Let's look at, shoreland zoning, Natural Resources Protection Act, and floodplain management. And David, I've got two really quick things. We learned that there are a lot of examples of mitigation happening. Reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in Maine in the coastal and marine sector, even though it's a small part of our coastal emissions pie. So we've learned about hybrid diesel ferries that are on order. The picture to the lower right is a solar panel array in Islesford. Just tremendous opportunity. So we want to keep that conversation with a larger group of folks that are interested in working waterfronts and ports and see how much further we can get. I'm just going to point out the beautiful boat on the upper right. Ask Stacy Kiefer of the Maine Marine Trades Association. It's a really wonderful and large, beautiful boat. So with that, I think, David, if we went over time, I'm sorry, but we are finished. Thank you very much.